Well, Chris Tomlin, thank you so much for being here with us here at CBN News. How are you, my friend?
Man, doing great. Thank you.
Well, it's good to talk with you, and it's always exciting when I can talk to somebody doing something that is not necessarily in their wheelhouse, or it's not in the vein that everybody in the public kind of sees you in, right? Everybody
Right.
knows you as the recording artist, the worship leader, but you're stepping into an executive producer role with this
Yes.
new film, The Last Supper from Pinnacle Peak. So, tell us one a little bit about the film, but two, how did you get hooked up with this?
It's a great question. I remember seeing when on the trailer, and it says from executive producer Chris Tomlin. I was like, what is going on right now? Yeah, you're talking about out of my wheelhouse, but really excited, man. Excited about this. Got involved when I saw the film and, connected with Michael and Corby and everybody and saw this film. And for me, it always kind of starts with the music side. And we were talking music and that kind of thing. And then saw the film and I was like, wow, this is incredibly powerful. And, this was, hey, could this work? Could there be a partnership here and like come alongside and be a part of helping get the word out on this, help people help us see it. For me, I've never done this before, as far as like from the, like my music's been in films and my music's been in things, but like partnering and like, okay, helping carry this to the people like this I've never done before. And so it's important to me, it's not just picking a film here. I was really moved by it and thought this is
Mm,
powerful. People need to see this. I thought it was unique that it was a Last Supper. It's usually any song, anything about Jesus is going to be the cross of the resurrection.
right.
And that the focus on the Last Supper, obviously the cross and the resurrection is in there because that's all around that. But just the powerful story, the way the story is told, I was immediately like, this is so well done. It's so beautifully done. It's like at the highest level, as far as filmmaking. It's at a high level, but it's also so accurate. It's so
Mm,
biblically like right on the money, and that was important to me. Like I'm not going to just get it right. Like I'm not just going to dive in right to something that I didn't feel like okay. I feel like this is right on scripture. This is right on the nose, and it wasn't taking all these liberties of what they maybe thought, maybe adding things in. It's just like it was just telling the story in such a
yeah.
beautiful way, and I think people will find themselves like me, just like like especially with the disciples. It just makes it so relatable. When you read the story so much, you've heard it so much, you just kind of have this in your mind of there's these mythical creatures, right? These
Right,
disciples,
right.
but man, it just takes them to real life, and you're like, you see yourself in it. You see yourself like, wow, what that? Yeah, that is so real. And there's a lot of moments we can talk about, but that really stand out. But yeah, I was instantly like, okay. And then I have this song, "No Greater Love," that I had written, and we're thinking about it, and they were like, man, we have these songs that kind of fit this movie that could fit like the movie. And I said, well, and I played a couple songs, and I got this one that I just wrote, and no one's heard it. I've literally no one's heard it, and played it for them. They're like, and it was I had not seen the movie when I wrote the song, and I was like, it just went like perfectly with this movie.
Mhm.
And I was like, okay, this feels like something that's right. And so all those things coming together was like, I'm in.
Yeah. You mentioned the way that we consume scripture when you're seeing it visually is different than when we're sitting and reading the Bible. Obviously, we know
Yes.
that the word is alive and active,
Yeah.
as scripture says. So it's still, of course, impacting us in the most important ways, but it still is a different experience when you're experiencing it and understanding it through a different medium like film. And I just want to ask, as somebody who's been on the front lines of recording as an artist and leading worship, and then now stepping into this role, how do you see technology and these new medias coming in and telling the story of the Bible? How do you see that changing the ways that we share and interact with the gospel, especially with our unbelieving friends and family?
Such a good, that's a good question, Trey. We're in an incredible moment too right now with this kind of content. I think people are just wanting and whether they even know it or not, are longing for this content. I'm seeing it like this just of something that fills them with faith, something that points them to a greater meaning in this world, right? and people are longing for that anyway. But I've always said this about music, especially about my worship music, is that it's really more about seeing than it is singing. When I'm doing music, I'm trying to help people see more than I'm helping them sing. When people can see God's goodness, when they can see His grace, when they can see His mercy in a
Mm.
song, when they see it, in their hearts, it helps them sing. It helps them respond. And so, how much more with a film like this, where you're really seeing it, and
Yeah.
that it brings it to life. And I think what's so powerful about this is this medium, this way of media, this amazing tool that we have to share God's love with people, that people who will never walk into a church or like, that's not for me, can see this and just have 2 hours to sit and be immersed in this, and be immersed in this world, in this story. And when it's told in such a compelling way, and that when you see people, like when you see Peter, and you're like, who can't relate with him, especially what believers can't relate with him, just like, I got all this faith, and there's nobody ever going to mess with you, Jesus. And then an hour later, he's like, I don't know who he is.
Right. Yeah.
It's like, I mean, that's, and then you got Judas, and this movie really shows the character of Judas, and like him, like wanting something completely different than what Jesus was talking about, and
Mm.
betraying Jesus, and how much of I have felt that. All those things, you're like, you see it, you brought into it, you're like, this is more than just a little story on a page. That I
Yeah.
read it when I was a kid, and I think it's powerful. There's something powerful too about the invitation of the Last Supper, of the table. There's something powerful about the table to me. Um,
Yeah.
that's a powerful image. And obviously, it's something as believers we've done for 2,000 years now. Almost every Sunday, at my church, every Sunday, we take the sacrament of the communion, right? Of the
Yeah.
bread and the wine. And you're like, and you can do it so much where it just becomes, this is what we do. But man, when you're reminded of like this moment when Jesus said, hey, this is what I came for, and He breaks the bread and He holds the wine. This is why I came. This is what it's all about.
Mm.
And the disciples not getting it, they're like, what still, what is He talking about?
Yeah.
And powerful. And I think the invitation for people, it's an inviting. I think about, Trey, I think when I was thinking about the table, it reminded me of Revelation, when Jesus in Revelation, these words are in red. It says, Jesus said, I stand at the door and knock. Behold, I stand at the door and knock. If anybody will open the door and let me in, I will come and dine with them,
Mm.
and have fellowship with them. And I was thinking, man, the invitation at the table, right? You got the Last Supper, but there's also, hopefully, people are drawn to this invitation of, man, I just want that Jesus is still saying, man, I want relationship with you. I want
Yeah.
you to know me. And so this movie is powerful in that way. But I was blown away by how well it's done. I mean, it is
Mm.
like, I think some maybe Christian films in the past have been kind of embarrassing, and like this is like so insanely well done. You're like, okay, I want to get behind this and let people know about it.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely think that the way that we create movies, Christian movies, has just evolved over the years, right? When we were first kind of toddlers and bobbing around trying to figure out what we were doing, and I think now we've reached a point where excellence, I think, is it has become the norm with so many Christian movies. And I, from what I've heard and from what I've seen of this movie, I know that this is no
Yes.
exception either. And I want to ask you about something you said a few minutes ago about the song that you wrote for this, or ended up using for this
Yeah.
movie, just kind of meshed perfectly.
Oh, it's
And it was
crazy.
already written, and then you come in to be a part of this movie. How have you seen, and maybe you can tell us a little bit more about that song in particular, but how have you
Yeah.
seen God just actively moving and kind of affirming your role in this film?
That's the big one, man. Because I'd written this song. You will love this. A little a little backstory of the song. I had written this with some guys that write country music, and you would probably know one of them, Tyler Hubbard, Florida Georgia Line, and like some in the two really like top songwriters in country music. We got together to write. They were doing a little writing retreat, and they're like, "Man, we want to write a worship song with you." And I was like, and they're like, we want to write something on no, no greater love than this, that a man lays down his life for his friends. There's no, and I was like, oh man, I love that. And we worked this song, and we wrote this at Ernest Hemingway's house. It's a
Oh,
national
wow.
landmark, and you can go and write at this home
Wow.
in Idaho. And so it was like this writing retreat. And it was the setting was amazing. And, we were just writing, and this song came to be, and I was like, wow, this is powerful. And so I made a little demo of it. And then when this movie came, and it's like, I mean, line for line, I mean, I was like, wow, this fits so perfectly. And so it was just one of those moments you're like, okay, we're in the flow. I'm in the flow.
Hmm.
God is in this. He's like, I'm putting the pieces together. You didn't even know I was putting these pieces together, but I've got this little plan. And I've seen that, and I'm sure you've seen that in your life too. So much in my
Yeah.
life, you're just like, wow, I did not see these pieces come together like this. But you're just trying to be faithful and follow and walk with God, and it's amazing what happens.
Yeah. One of the last questions I want to ask you really is just about your ministry, your career as a worship leader. It's something that I like to ask people who do lead worship is because when you step onto a stage as a worship leader, that's different than when you step onto the stage as a secular artist, right? And you're going to a concert. You're leading people into the presence of the Lord, and that's the
Exactly.
calling that God has placed on your life. So, but that's a big and important calling. So before you step onto a stage to lead worship, how do you prepare yourself mentally and spiritually to lead a group of people?
Man, such a great question. Um, I always take it as an incredible responsibility. And I always
Mm,
pray this prayer: God, if your presence does not show up, then it's not this, there's not going to be any kind of real lasting thing. But what I mean is, I always pray for the presence of God to touch people. It reminds me, it makes me think of Moses, when God was sending Moses, and he said, "Go, lead my people." And he's like, "No, no, no, not me." And and he said, "Who will go with me?" And he goes, God said, I'm going with you." And he says, and Moses says, um, asked for God's presence to go with him. He says, "For what will distinguish me but among the people of the earth, but your presence?" And I think about my
mm,
music, and I think about my songs, and I'm playing the same chords as everybody else who's ever played music. There's only 12 notes on the scale. I haven't created new notes. I've not created new chords. I'm not playing with new instruments. But the thing that I pray for is that God touches these songs with their presence, and people sense God's presence when they encounter Him. And I always say this: there's nothing like the sound of the people of God singing the praises of God in the presence of God. And when that happens, it's so powerful. So it is so different. And Trey, what you're saying, I say it every night from the stage. Tonight ought to be different than any other music of the world. Not because I'm better, but your soul is singing to a living God.
mm.
And your soul is your soul. This is eternal. What we're doing is eternal. So I always have that perspective, like what we're doing here is eternal. This is not just, oh, let's sing a couple songs that sound nice. And this is our soul is singing to God. And so I'm always coming with those kind of thoughts and prayer. God, touch people with your presence, and even back to this movie, I believe people will be touched with God's presence when they watch this
Yeah.
movie, and I hope they do it together. I would just, March 14th is the release,
Yeah.
and I hope that people will come together in the theater. There's something powerful about it's one thing to, it's not meant to be watched on on
Yeah.
your phone. This is like being in the theater together, God's people as a community. This will be powerful together to experience this, and I believe people, God will touch them with His presence, whether they even know Him or not.
Yeah. Yeah. I said that was my last question. If I want to fit in, squeeze in one more if you have a minute. It's just, I think so often we listen to, we're talking about what is worship, and we just immediately tie it to singing a song. But
Yes.
worship is so much more than just singing a song. And I know this is a big question, but what is worship to you, and what has worship become to you as somebody who has been a recording artist and a worship leader
Mm,
for so long?
I think it's simple. It can be simple. There's so many ways you can come at it, but when it dials down simply for me is it's all worship is all of me for all of Him, all
Mhm.
of me for all of God, in a sense. And so that's so much more than singing, right? It's so
Yeah.
much more than just singing a song. And
Yeah.
it's how I live my life. It's how I raise my kids. It's how I go about my business. It's how I, um, just treat my neighbor. It's all those things. And um, but there, but it's putting that there's something greater than me, and it's recognizing that I am not the center of the world. That the world does not revolve around me, but it's realizing that, wow, my life orbits around God. God is the center, and my life orbits around Him. He does not orbit around me.
Yeah.
And that is when you get in that kind of place. Um, I mean, I wrote a whole book on it. This is an interview about my book, but I wrote a
Yeah.
whole book on it called "How Great Is Our God," and it's just living a worship-led life in a me-driven world, and that is, the whole. That's what it kind of boils down to.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Well, Chris Tomlin, thank you so much for being here. The movie is The Last Supper. It'll be in
Yes,
theaters on March 14th. Is that correct?
March 14th. It's going to be that's an amazing day. People need. Hopefully, I just encourage everybody: grab your friends, grab your churches, go see this together. Once again, be moved, be inspired, and remember, especially coming up on this Easter season.
Yeah.
It's coming out during that time for a reason, and people will just be like, "Oh wow!" Just be remembered again of like what this is all about.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Chris, thank you so much for your time. We appreciate it.
Yeah, man, great to talk to you.